Trump has decided that he is the military mayor of D.C. He's also at war with statistics, and he's still working on figuring out which side of the Russia-Ukraine war to take. J.D. Vance has been given the unenviable job of going on offense regarding Epstein. And if we have time, we'll discuss this Sydney Sweeney thing. Welcome back to the podcast for the 54% of Americans who regularly vote for progress in every election and want to convince their friends and family members to join our majority. This is Majority 54.
All right, Jason. Well, the big news, there's a lot happening this week, but let's start with what's going on in Washington, D.C. We can roll for the video audience, just video of what this looks like, but you had FBI and DEA agents patrolling Georgetown last night. This comes as Trump has announced in the past few days that he plans to use federal troops and the federal government writ large and law enforcement agencies to, as he says, clean up Washington, D.C. I have been monitoring the debates around this, and it is baffling, honestly. Like, there is this debate going on the internet right now about whether Democrats are playing into Trump's hands when they say things like, well, crime is down in D.C., and when they push back against this. And the theory goes that Democrats are out of touch with the average American who looks at places like D.C., New York, and L.A. and says these are ungovernable places with homeless people sleeping on the streets and levels of crime that we have. And honestly, my jaw is kind of on the floor about all this. But how does this play in a place like Kansas City?
Well, look, I think on the one hand, there's plenty of people here who probably look at DC and just, you don't have to, I don't even know what the current crime statistics are in DC, but people think of DC as a violent and dangerous place. I don't think this is something people are talking about a whole lot. Look, in Kansas City, it's not like we don't have our own violent crime problem. So here in the middle of the country, I think definitely people are, and Trump's playing into this, more likely to feel like cities are dangerous places, particularly if you choose to live in the suburbs, the exurbs, or a rural area. That is something people believe about cities. What I would say is that when I watch those clips of DEA and FBI agents walking down the street, I think they feel ridiculous because, if you look at the way that, they know that they are part of a political show of force, not an actual show of force. And it's probably a little bit embarrassing for them, is my guess.
Right. And I think the mayor is kind of caught in a difficult spot here where she doesn't want to make things worse. And so in some ways, she's trying to meet with these federal law enforcement agents and cooperate to the best of her ability. But at the same time, she's an elected official in a place that, by all estimates, resents what Trump is doing. So she's doing this two-step where she's meeting with these members of law enforcement and putting on a good face, saying that they're going to do everything they can to utilize these resources effectively. But then she's blasting Trump in other venues. And you got to think this is not going to work out well for either her or the District of Columbia. But sticking with Trump for a second here, CNN had a clever juxtaposition that they played last night. Here's a clip of Trump this week versus May 7th, which, if you can count, was not too long ago.
Nope.
Let's listen to this.
Our capital city has been overtaken by violent gangs and bloodthirsty criminals, roving mobs of wild youth, drugged out maniacs and homeless people. And we're not going to let it happen anymore. We're not going to take it.
No, Eddie's very talented. Crime is down in Washington, D.C. Street crime, violent crime by 25%. And people have seen, they've noticed a big difference.
And the murder rates are plummeting. We are now able to report that the murder rate is on track to be the lowest in U.S. history, in modern recorded U.S. history, thanks to this team behind me and President Trump's priorities.
So
which is it, man?
Yeah. So this was, this is a 2-month swing here. And we could operate on the rational level and then the emotional lizard brain level here. On the rational side of things, I'm sorry if people feel like this is out of touch to say, but I said this when we were losing the battle over how to talk about the economy during the end of the Biden administration. I'll say it now. Crime is going down in DC. And Trump just said that 2 months ago. His own FBI director somehow is talking about it now. I don't even understand what kind of message they're trying to spin here. It is important to point that out, and it is not out of touch to say what the reality is. Inevitably, people are going to come back and say, well, like, tell that to the person whose daughter got mugged. There's always going to be a person whose daughter got mugged. Like, you can always argue through anecdotes, right? In this case, the District of Columbia is doing something right to bring their crime down. And even if they weren't, there are a whole lot of other things that would need to happen to justify the kind of federal presence that Trump has here. And they're obviously trying to take what they did in California, which we've talked about here, and now they're going to take what they do in DC, and this will not be the end of it. A lot of you listening to this could be coming to a city near you. Here's what the Assistant Secretary of DHS had to say about that.
Theft or other crimes against them.
Well, you know, Judge Jeanine Pirro, now U.S. Attorney Pirro, was doing a news conference on this. She said, I don't care what the numbers are. People are getting hurt. They're getting murdered. You mentioned carjackings. That's a big thing. So this is necessary. How difficult would it be, Trish McLaughlin, to expand this into other cities that have the same problem? Now, the capital is a capital. It's a special situation. But, you've got other cities. People are suffering. The residents would like to have better public safety, even though the mayors and governors wouldn't. How hard is it to spread this?
Well, of course, you look at Los Angeles, Chicago, Boston, or New York, they're also facing record numbers of homicides and violent crimes. I think it's natural for us to look at, could Washington, D.C., if we can really clean this up, if we can get rid of this plague of crime and violent activities that's happening in our nation's capital, could that be a blueprint and a model for other communities around the country?
Yes.
It's something I think President Trump wouldn't shy away from, but we'll have to stay tuned.
You think about the cities she mentioned, right? They're basically all blue state cities. Now, here are the actual top 10 cities in America by violent crime.
Can I, before you even get into that, can I just say, like, it is the most Trump administration thing, and people should point this out, that they often end interviews by saying, stay tuned, because that's the entire thing. It's theater. The whole thing is theater. It's what we want is for you to stay tuned. We don't really care about results. We want you to stay tuned. That's the whole deal.
Right. And let's look at the actual top cities for violent crime in America in order. Memphis, Tennessee, Cleveland, Ohio, Toledo, Ohio, Little Rock, Arkansas, Peoria, Illinois. That's the top 5. 4 of those top 5 are in red states. Right? So it's like, but that's not what they mention, right? They want this to be a playbook where they can utilize, as they say, it doesn't matter what the data is. If there's any crimes being committed, right, in a country of hundreds of millions of people, right, which is a impossible standard to ever meet, right? There will always be crimes. Doesn't matter how much those crimes are dropping. We're going to have a test case here in Washington, D.C. And what's interesting is the way that they talk about it, right? So they're not just saying violent crime anymore. Now they're clearing homeless encampments. And I think an open question for you, Jason, who's done a lot of work with the homeless, is it's one thing to clear homeless encampments. Where are you sending these people?
Yeah, people got to go somewhere. And I'll tell you where they're going to go. They're going to go to Maryland and they're going to go to Virginia. And like, look, if you put a large federal law enforcement presence on the ground in Washington, D.C., in 3 or 4 weeks, you are going to be able to point to numbers that show, manufactured or otherwise, that crime went down. Because even if all you did was say you're going to increase the law enforcement presence on the street, there's going to be less crime. it's just that's how it works. It doesn't mean that it's a sustainable approach.
You're on the board of Giffords, maybe every town, like all these things. Let me read you a quote from Jeanine Pirro that may prompt a reaction from you here in the sort of this may deserve a place in the Chutzpah Hall of Fame here. This is Pirro. I don't need any more statistics. All I need are people to recognize that these were vibrant human beings cut down because of illegal guns.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, the majority of the country has recognized it and would like the government to do something about illegal guns. Like, I don't know, make more of them illegal to start with would be really helpful.
It's really unbelievable, honestly. I have like a general assessment of where we are, but before we get there, this clip. This is a clip from Senator Kennedy from Louisiana, and I want you to watch this.
You specifically put in the outline that I was not to watch it until we do the show.
I just want you to even attempt to explain to me what's going on in this clip. Let's go to it.
And finally, I see world-beating vacuity and stupidity. I see movie stars and pop singers who partied with Harvey Weinstein. I see the tofu mob with their NPR tote bags and their organic broccoli. And I see many of my Democratic friends who, in response to said president, foam at the mouth and have their 19th nervous breakdown. And instead of thanking the president or saying, good idea, they accuse him of undermining democracy.
Yeah.
And I just think to myself, the mind is a terrible thing to waste. And that's what I think America sees.
And Senator, I think Michael Schoen.
Which part of that are we in, Ravi? I'm trying to think. Like, I don't feel like any of those. I don't really do tofu. And if I did, I doubt I'd be inclined to join a mob of such. I mean, look, it's bait, right? Like, that's the whole idea. Like, we don't want to talk about Epstein. We so don't want to talk about Epstein that we will, as Karzai did in Afghanistan, becoming the mayor of Kabul, Trump will become the mayor of DC to have something to incite the left to get argumentative about and look out of touch, and then B, have something to say he accomplished in a few weeks. And because it looks like action. Anytime you deploy troops, it looks like action. I mean, props to Trump because, past presidents, when they really had a major personal scandal and they wanted to distract people and people thought that using the military was, sometimes it was maybe accurate to make this accusation, sometimes not. But people said they were wagging the dog by using the military to distract from things at home. Usually they did it, on a foreign shore. Trump, he's really stepped it up a notch. And he's like, I just deploy the military here so that people really don't pay attention to the Epstein list. And then Foghorn Leghorn goes on Fox and starts talking about vacuity. I don't know what the hell he's talking about. I think he's mostly just not talking about Epstein, right?
I mean, I'm just trying to put myself, and this is a dangerous mental exercise, just in the average Fox viewer at home. And I'm like, what are they like? What do they hear when they hear that clip? Because it's like, it's so insane to me, like that. And I guess this is the reality they want people to live in. Like last week when you weren't here, I talked to myself about Sydney Sweeney and how there were like 100 times as many Sydney Sweeney mentions than Epstein last week. And they were inventing a controversy, really. Like,
nobody was actually upset about it.
The internet, you can find anybody, right? So they'll find whoever is out there. This is what the Libs of TikTok account does, and they'll find whatever purple-haired communist there is on the Oberlin campus who's talking about Sydney Sweeney, and then they'll be like, "This is the entire Democratic Party," and then they become obsessed with it, and then they're like, it's almost like, why are you obsessed with me meme? It's like where it's like nobody's obsessed, you're obsessed. But
but it's kind of working, and that's, look, here's the problem with why this is going to potentially, why this can work, is because if you live on the East Coast or you visit the East Coast, or you live in like a major city, that it's like, you don't feel scared when you walk around most places. Like, sure, like I don't care where you are in the country. Like at night, you're probably going to be a little more alert if you're going somewhere by yourself. I mean, if you're in your hometown in your rural area, like, probably not. Everybody, right? But if you're visiting somewhere, or if you live in DC or New York, and particularly if you're a woman, like, you're more on guard. That's natural. That's true in most places in the world, by the way. But if you, like, I lived in DC for several years. I visit DC from time to time. I just visited New York. Like, I'm a person who lives in the middle of the country and knows, like, I walk around in New York City without feeling. In fact, I'll be honest, oftentimes in New York City, I feel safer than I do at home because of the gun laws in New York. Like, here at home, like, I assume a lot of people are armed, and I don't assume that there. And also, there is a pretty substantial law enforcement presence already on streets in places like New York and DC, much more than here, I mean, much more than in cities that are as spread out as ours. But if you don't go to those places very often, how is your image of these places formed? It is formed through what you see on the news, and if it bleeds, it leads. That's generally how it works. And through the American form of myth, which is movies. And like, how many movies have we seen about organized crime, about street crime, about, I mean, you could just summon in your mind right now, if I say, think of a movie where there's crime on the streets of DC or crime on the streets of New York, you could summon 4 or 5 in your mind right now. Crocodile Dundee, whatever, right? Like, that's not a knife. All that stuff. It's been in our minds and in front of us for years. So this is a very easy move, and it can be a very effective move if we do not personally message it very carefully, I think.
Well, let's move on to, I talked about our purple hair communist friends from Oberlin. I've been wondering.
2 Oberlin shout outs. You never get an Oberlin. My great uncle went to Oberlin. 2 Oberlin shout outs.
Just when I imagine like out of touch liberals, I think of places like Oberlin. But the most out of touch communist we have in this country might be in the Oval Office, because I've seen a lot of signs lately that this guy is as socialist as the most socialist Latin American dictator we've ever seen. And you can look in almost under any rock and see evidence for this. I want to start with the Treasury Secretary, Scott Bessent, who went on TV and gave this explanation for our tariff strategy.
We have these agreements in place where the Japanese, the Koreans, and to some extent the Europeans will invest in companies and industries that we direct them largely at the president's discretion.
And how does that work? I mean, it's almost like an offshore appropriation. I'm not sure we've ever had anything like that in the States before. Have you consulted with the Senate Finance Committee or the House Ways and Means Committee or what?
Well, Larry, I think a good framing of that is other countries, in essence, are providing us with a sovereign wealth fund. So
they're going to buy our goods. That's essentially what's going on. Wait, let me step back. They're going to build our factories. They're going to help us to build new factories, which Mr. Trump loves.
Exactly. So the way to think about it is these huge surpluses accumulated offshore. Let's take Japan. We're going to have $550 billion, and they will be reinvesting that back into the U.S. economy, and we will be able to direct them as we reshore these critical industries. We are trying to de-risk the U.S. economy from what we saw during COVID.
President loves new factories. He'll take rehabbed old factories, but he loves new factories. And
what a make-believe world they're living in. I mean, go ahead and make your argument about it being communist, and then I'll talk about
this wasn't the most communist thing I've seen, but it's in line with this idea, and they talk about this with corporations too, and we had this news that Trump is having the U.S. government take a 25% stake in Nvidia's profits selling chips to China, which begs a whole lot of questions. Number one, why are we letting Nvidia sell these very important strategic chips to China? That there hasn't been any debate around that. I thought we were against that, but then now we're forcing Nvidia to give us like a cut, like we're like the mafia of those proceeds.
Very much like we're the mafia.
And again, like that's actually a very interesting area where like people could debate one way or the other. Mark Cuban took to Twitter this week arguing that a lot of these things, including the tariffs, are like effectively a corporate tax. But this is kind of my point, is that Trump has this weird combination of like very heavy government intervention, usually meant to serve not the U.S. taxpayer, because as we saw with the big beautiful bill, so-called, he has no problem running historic deficits. But he views it as a source of his power. So when he reaches in and says things like, I'm going to take a 25% cut of this, or he told Goldman Sachs he didn't like their chief economist this week, or he pushes Apple, and we'll watch a clip of that, to invest in the U.S. It's about people bending the knee to him. And you could see that Scott Besson in this clip. And the reason why I played it is like, there's all the fantasy stuff, which I hope you can pick apart a little bit. But then there's just this arrogance, which is that we're going to get now countries to bend the knee to us. It's not about the money. It's just about them bending the knee and saying, okay, we need you so bad that we'll just say yes.
Yeah. And the fantasy part of it is that there's Americans that are just thinking, man, I just wish I could work on an assembly line again. Like, this is the make America great again at the heart of it is just a form of nostalgia for a time that only existed for a portion of the country to begin with. Like, this idea that, you know, first of all, the idea that like you could go to one job and work at that one job for a long time and that could make it where you could send your kids to college and afford a home and all those things. The reason that we don't have that has nothing to do with any of the crap that they're addressing. It has to do with the war that they have waged on collective bargaining rights for people in the workplace. It has to do with the cost of college, which they refuse to do anything about. It has to do with the cost of housing, which they refuse to do anything about. So instead of addressing any of that crap, they're just going to say, well, the reason that you don't have those things, which, by the way, there was a large portion of the country that never really got access to those things because of inequality to begin with. But they make us nostalgic for those things. And then they say, well, the way we get back to those things is this imaginary world where a lot of things have to happen that don't make any economic sense. But one of the things that has to happen that doesn't make any common sense is all of a sudden Americans who are not working in factories, and many of whom are doing things like working remotely, are suddenly going to want to go back to standing all day and doing manual labor jobs. And I'm sorry, I just don't think that's what the majority of American workers want to do. It's not to say that they don't want good union jobs and that they don't want, vocations and skilled jobs. I just don't think the world in which Americans are the ones assembling iPhones is what Americans are pining for.
Yeah, and there's this assumption that these countries need us so bad that
there's other countries in the world they can deal with. They don't actually need us as bad as he claims, and that's a problem.
Well, yeah, there's also a contradiction at the heart of all of this, which is he's devaluing the dollar. Mm-hmm. They have this fantasy that we're going to build all these new factories and Americans are going to go to work, et cetera. And there also was this argument that was in vogue within MAGA for a while that creeps up every now and then, which is we're going to cut consumption in the U.S. and that we're conspicuously consuming. So in a world where all of that is going on, the U.S. would, I guess, be consuming less global goods. These other countries would need us way less. They would be much less likely to capitulate on anything Trump is saying. There's also this, I think, very obvious tell, and we can see this in a second with Tim Cook in the White House, where people know they can make bold pronouncements of future factory, this and that to Trump, and
he'll lay off
the shiny object. It's the airplane, which they can give like right away, but it's the small shiny object. Like, well, let's just watch it. Here's the ultimate example of this shiny object.
Press release costs you nothing,
right? Or a golden iPhone in this case, which is the equivalent of the airplane that the Emiratis or the Qataris, whoever gave us. Let's go to this clip.
Do you mind if I step up?
Yes, please.
This bottom was made here in the U.S., California, and this glass comes off the Corning line. It's engraved for President Trump. It's a unique unit of one. It was designed by a U.S. Marine Corps corporal, a former one, that works at Apple now.
That's good. He's done well.
Designed it for you. And the base comes from Utah and is 24 karat gold. And it sits, I'll take the liberty of setting it up.
Wow.
I'm going to puke.
Well, let's see. There we go. Congratulations,
Thank you
Mr. President. Thank you so much.
The great people of Kentucky.
I mean, they're working him, obviously. Like, we got all the things in there. Like, they forgot to mention that the corporal loves apple pie. But they're working him. But what bothers me about it is that means they're working us, because like he's the president of this country. And like the fact that Tim Cook has to work him and give him a gift and make it gold and say, we're going to build this stuff that who knows if they're going to build, just to get him off their ass. When, by the way, like the whole make-believe world of we're going to do all these factories, we're going to do these things, is a make-believe world in which you have to pretend that AI is not advancing. It's not happening. Robots are not becoming an increasingly large part of our lives, and probably in the not too distant future a part of the labor force. Like they're actively working to try and create more human manufacturing jobs at a time when it is obviously the case that more robots are going to be taking human manufacturing jobs from humans. Like, that is epically a stupid long-term economic policy.
Yeah, I think like the immediate reaction was people getting really mad at Tim Cook and
I don't blame Tim Cook.
Caved. There's like two readings of this video. It's like, one is that he's playing Trump, and you could imagine the chapter of his memoir 20 years from now, 15 years from now, where he's like, oh man, remember that time when I got Trump off my back by just merely giving him a gold-plated iPhone and promising a factory that was never built. But then there's the question of like, where are the leaders in this country anymore? You look at universities capitulating, and there's news now that potentially even Harvard, who looked like one of the holdouts, is now going to cave. You have one corporation after another caving like this. And they're all jockeying for Trump's approval. And whenever he reaches in to tell them what to do, like Nvidia, they do it right away. There's a lot of evidence that what he asked Nvidia to do is actually illegal. And nobody's really pointing any of that out. We're in a dangerous place right now. And we would be in a much less dangerous place if people started to show courage, like people like Tim Cook, the people who can actually stand up to Trump would do it.
But the problem with that is that Tim Cook has a fiduciary obligation to his shareholders. Like, you can't get around that. Is that he is legally bound by his position to do what is in the best interest, not of Americans, but in the like, if he doesn't do what's in the best interest of his shareholders, then he's supposed to be removed. And he is. But the way capitalism works is that means if he's not working in the best interest of his shareholders, he's not doing his job. I'm not saying that makes it morally okay or any of those things, but I'm saying if we are looking to the Tim Cooks of the world to lead us out, we are looking in the wrong place. And it is not encouraging that the people who are stepping up as leaders seem to be comics, podcasters, activists, and like some elected officials. Mark Maron has a great line where he talks about, or maybe it's Jon Stewart, I can't remember. He talks about how our society seems to have turned to comedians more and more for like their take on things. And I believe the line is like, but what do the clowns think? And so, but that's kind of where we are.
Here's the problem. Everybody's a corporation now, right? Like you probably have LLCs and S Corps. I do. Like all these comedians have their own little companies. Harvard, Yale, all these people are operating like hedge funds with educational institutions attached.
True, but I'm saying, but when you're a public, it is a different set of standards. Like I'm not saying he's absolved. I'm saying like people are only, at the end of the day, it is hard to expect people to act beyond their incentives. And it's right. And so we do need leaders, but it's hard to anticipate somebody like Tim Cook being that person.
Yeah, I think like my larger point there is like, I totally agree, is that I think we've become such a capitalistic, individualistic society across the board. And these are just the most like
working to the bad
aggressive versions of that the law firms, the educational institutions, these institutions that used to have a more civic duty, even the corporations used to be more civically minded than they are today, more patriotic.
I agree.
We are at an all-time low of civic virtue and ideals beyond just narrow self-interest.
Oh, it's been hollowed out by Trump, but I would definitely hold the educational institutions and law firms to a higher and different standard, right? Because educational institutions have a mission that is completely different, obviously, than than a corporation. And beyond that, the law firms, yes, while they are for-profit entities, as you and I know, they have also sworn oaths to uphold the law, and that is actually meant to supersede everything else. I mean, they're lawyers and they're officers of the court, and so they should get there's no excuse, as you and I have talked about, I think online and offline. So
yeah. Well, let's take a break. And before we go, I'm going to play as part of this break a clip of this show called Where the Schools Went. And it's a podcast. I've spent a big chunk of the past year down in New Orleans. We're now coming on 20 years since Hurricane Katrina. And I went down there and interviewed like 60 plus people at this point about what has happened to that education system and what we could learn from it. And so if you like what you hear, you can go to Where the Schools Went, wherever you get your podcast. We've been surging to the top of the charts. We're now near the top of the education charts for podcasts, and we're getting tons of great feedback from people down there and elsewhere. And so here's a clip from that podcast, and then we'll take a break. And then when we come back, we're going to talk about Trump's war on statistics, the Russia-Ukraine war, and Epstein. 20 years ago, our nation watched a city drown.
New Orleans is getting hit very hard. A lot of objects flying through the air here, including things like siding.
Incredible amount of water coming in with this. Winds been gusting 120 miles an hour in some cases. Just a howling, screeching wind almost makes your ears pop a little bit.
Hurricane Katrina was the deadliest storm in American history.
To wake up that next morning and hear that your city's just gone, it was a shock.
I lost everything. Everybody in my family lost everything.
There was military helicopters overhead. All the street lights were still out. It was eerie. It just was kind of this like odd post-apocalyptic kind of feel.
So I turn on my little 13-inch black and white TV. I heard Bob Brick say something to the effect that like, if people don't leave, there won't be enough body bags.
The storm drowned homes, neighborhoods, entire communities. It swept away the city's schools. Gone too were the rituals and traditions that connected generations. How do you rebuild a city without its schools? Where the Schools Went is a new podcast from The Branch in partnership with the 74 and Midas Touch. It's the story of what happens when an entire school system disappears and a city is forced to start over.
We were constantly updating addresses because our kids were constantly moving from a shelter to a hotel to maybe a church and then maybe to an apartment.
The littlest kids would hide under the desk. The older kids, they were too cool to do things like hide under the desk, but they were flinched.
We could not occupy the first floor because of the standing water.
You're being shot out of a cannon every morning when you wake up.
What followed was the most dramatic school makeover our country has ever seen. Some call it a tragedy.
If your goal was to break up the black community, break up the black power structure, take wealth from an already poor community, then yes, it was a beautiful success.
Others, a miracle.
This community has actually used the crisis as an opportunity to start rebuilding and try to experiment with new ways of learning.
Over the course of this series, we'll trace the story from chaos to reinvention. We'll meet the educators, families, students, and critics who lived it. And we'll ask, what do we owe each other when everything falls apart? Where the Schools Went, available wherever you get your podcasts. Episode 1 drops August 12th.
Typical children's vitamins are basically candy in disguise, filled with 2 teaspoons of sugar, unhealthy chemicals, and other gummy junk growing kids should never eat. That's why Hiya was created, the pediatrician-approved, super-powered, chewable vitamin. While most children's vitamins are filled with 5 grams of sugar and can contribute to a variety of health issues, Hiya is made with 0 sugar and 0 gummy junk, yet it tastes great and it's perfect for picky eaters, i.e. kids. Hiya fills in the most common gaps in modern children's diets to provide the full body nourishment our kids need with a yummy taste that they love. Formulated with the help of nutritional experts, Hiya is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and veggies, then supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals, including vitamin D, B12, C, zinc, folate, and many others to help support immunity, energy, brain function, mood, concentration, teeth, bones, and more. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, and everything else that you can imagine. Hiya is designed for kids of all ages and sent straight to your door so parents have one less thing to worry about. As you know, I'm a father and I'm always on the lookout for the best possible vitamins for my child to take. I'm so happy that I've come across Hiya Health. The ingredients are amazing and I don't have to worry about sugar or gummy junk because Hiya Health is made without that stuff and is still able to keep the great taste, which is super important because that's how you get kids to eat it. We've worked out a special deal with Hiya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/majority. This deal is not available on the regular website. Go to hiyahealth.com/majority and get your kids the full body nourishment that they need to grow into healthy adults.
When we relaunched this podcast, it seemed like we had to figure it all out on our own. Scripts, setups, filming schedules, logos. It was super overwhelming. And every day it seemed like we had a new decision that needed a new answer. And when you're starting off with something new, it seems like your to-do list keeps growing every day with new tasks, and that list can easily begin to overrun your life. Finding the right tool that not only helps you out, but simplifies everything can be such a game changer. For millions of businesses, that tool is Shopify. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the US, from household names like Mattel and Gymshark to brands just getting started. The Midas Touch Network is proud to have their own store using the Shopify platform. You can get started with your own design studio with hundreds of ready-to-use templates. Shopify helps you build a beautiful online store to match your brand style, accelerate your content creation. Shopify is packed with helpful AI tools that write product descriptions, page headlines, and even enhance your product photography. Now get the word out like you have a marketing team behind you. You can easily create email and social media campaigns whenever your customers are scrolling or strolling. And best yet, Shopify is your commerce expert with world-class expertise in everything from managing inventory to international shipping to processing, returns, and beyond. Turn your business idea into with Shopify on your side. Sign up for your $1 per month trial and start selling today at shopify.com/majority. Go to shopify.com/majority, shopify.com/majority. All right. Well, I talked about this last week, Jason, but when Trump fired the head of the Bureau of Labor Statistics because he didn't like the fact that she pointed out that we have some troubling signs on unemployment, he predictably has named a replacement who we don't really have to spend too much time here other than to say that this is a guy who has a very thin record. He just got his PhD a couple of years ago. He's worked at the Heritage Foundation. He is part of the Project 2025, which again, we're just going to pretend like we weren't lied to in the past election about how this wasn't a real thing.
Right.
So wait a minute.
Can we back up for a second? The guy was part of 2025 and now he's in charge of facts.
Yeah.
I see no problem there at all.
And now we have this guy's goes on places like Bannon's War Room, etc. And he is a guy
I'm gonna run for president on the platform that Aaron Sorkin will be in charge of the Bureau of Labor and Statistics going forward. Because if we're gonna live in our own reality, I very much prefer the one from the West Wing. I prefer his liberal reality. So
yeah, we are. For listeners, you might want to dust off that copy of 1984. Like the hyperbole, we are beyond the hyperbole at this point. Like, I think it's really hard for people week in and week out, day in and day out, to really think about how unprecedented where we are is, not even where we are, and not even a year into this administration. Like, they are doing everything possible everywhere you look, from whether it's law enforcement to foreign policy to fiscal policy to redistricting, and now to the very data that we get to create their own universe. And
we already live in a world where that's happening, right? Like that's right. Happening without the government forcing it on us. And so, yeah, it's very dangerous when the government's in on the. Oh, okay. How are we going to get more optimistic going?
Well, I don't think there is a lot of reasons for optimism on this one. I mean, there are private versions of some of these data gathering services that will allow us and the market to test out whether the administration is telling the truth or not. and people have their own lived experience. But when it, we saw this in the reverse under Biden, though, like when the numbers were going like in the right direction, the media, especially the right-wing media, but I also say with a lot of help from traditional media, were spinning these stories about how tragic and horrible things were and sending the impression that things were worse when most of the macro indicators told us it was better. We're about to get the opposite of this. Things will be getting worse, and both the right-wing media and then the statistics that
And
our government puts out
every day
we'll be telling people it's worse. So it's like, unless there's like a full-on depression or recessionary event, let's just say like inflation doubles, right? Like the average person will feel that, but it's going to be up to us and whatever limited, people in the objective media universe are left to put in perspective when somebody goes to the gas pump, which is, sometimes included and sometimes not, depending on what inflationary measure, or the grocery store, or paying for services or goods, and they see higher prices. And then Trump tells them, like, implies to them that, that might be a local phenomenon. That might be about one corporation. They're very good at passing the buck. We have to continue to remind people who's really responsible for that. And we will be doing that with less of a sure footing than we ever would in any traditional environment, because the very stats that everybody used to agree on, they're not going to agree on anymore.
Well, and it's the whole point of this show, right? Is the idea that individual people having individual conversations are far more effective than any sort of statistics or economic indicators. But yeah, the Trump administration, when the economy starts to, head downward, is going to have a choice between telling people that everything is fine, that being that meme standing in front of the fire saying everything is fine, or saying this is all done by the Democrats. And I imagine they'll opt for a little bit of both, since they're not really known for their message discipline.
Yeah, well, let's talk Ukraine really quickly. Trump is heading to Alaska on Friday, and there's some breaking news right before we went to record here. Trump has announced that he's agreed with European leaders to honor Zelensky's red lines for the coming talks with Putin in Alaska. And Trump is saying that he wants to have a trilateral summit after that. He has threatened Putin in the past 24 hours with very severe consequences if Putin refuses to ceasefire. That comes amidst like some conflicting evidence here. Trump was asked if he, just earlier this week, about whether he would, whether Ukraine would have to give up territory. And in this clip, I think there's some reason to, like, Trump has been all over the place, but here's maybe the better version of Trump in this clip. And then I'll play a clip where, just from also a couple of days ago that suggests otherwise. But let's start with this one.
Now, President Zelensky has to get all of his everything he needs, because he's going to have to get ready to sign something. And I think he is working hard to get that done.
Will Zelensky have to give up territory, Mr. President?
Well, you're looking at territory that's been fought over for 3.5 years with, a lot of Russians have died, a lot of Ukrainians have died. So we're looking at that, but we're actually looking to get some back and some swapping. It's complicated. It's actually nothing easy. It's very complicated, but we're going to get some back. We're going to get some switched. There'll be some swapping of territories to the betterment of both. And but we'll be talking about that either later or tomorrow or whatever.
Those expectations are so low here, I have to say, that nothing he said made sense. But the reason why I say that this clip is somewhat positive is because he, like a couple of days just before this, had this to say.
I told President Trump
and I get along with Zelensky, but, I disagree with what he's done. Very, very severely disagree. This is a war that should have never happened, wouldn't have happened. But
so, like,
what does that even mean?
Well, a couple of days before, he was back on this line that Zelensky somehow started this war, but now he had a conversation with Melania. I don't know, who seems to be fairly pro-Ukraine from what we can gather.
You know what I think it is? I think, honestly, sometimes when you ask Donald Trump a question, and this happens to a lot of politicians, it's just most of them don't glitch quite as hard as he does. When you ask Donald Trump a question he doesn't know the answer to, he just goes back into the limited memory bank that is like this is what you said about this once, and then he fires that fuse. And most politicians, I think, are wired appropriately enough that they go, wait, that doesn't apply anymore, and then they don't really do that. Trump glitches harder than that. So like, if Trump is not sure what to say, he just says the thing he used to say, even if he doesn't say that anymore. And I think that's what happened.
Well, the first clip is actually quite crazy. Like, I haven't met a Ukrainian expert that is talking about land swaps like that. I mean, I could be missing something big. I think the big worry that everybody has had, which it seems like some people have somewhat successfully, at least as of today, there's still plenty of time this week for him to screw this up. Somebody must have gotten to him, because the big worry was that Trump was going to go into this meeting and get played by Putin like he has gotten played so many times before, and that Putin would go in, have his Russian translator, rely on the ambiguity that he always does, and also like count on the fact that he knows way more about this issue than Trump would ever care to know, and that Trump really doesn't care anyway, and he could push Trump around. And some people seem to have gotten to Trump, and as of today, he sounds a little better than he normally does. I wouldn't say I'm super optimistic, but this is better than he sounded a couple of days ago.
I think they convinced him that he was going to look pretty stupid going to a summit with Putin, when a summit on American soil, or really anywhere outside of Russia or the UN, is what Putin has been looking for with an American president for years. And they realized, like, I think somebody convinced him that he was going to look weak, which is really the only way to get anything across to Trump. And by the way, like, the reason that I say that is glitching so hard to say that is because, one, when he said it, it was a stupid thing to say that the country that was invaded and it was their own fault. And two, like, his views, at least it seems, have evolved since then. And so to still say that, you seem extra like you just don't get what's going on, man.
Yeah, and I was trying to look this up, but there was this Trump's ambassador to NATO said something even crazier last week, where he said something to the effect of, it's not like we're going to ask Russia to give back their hard-fought territory or something like that.
Good God. Like, what?
I mean, truly.
Hard-fought. It's not theirs. It's not theirs. It is hard-fought, but I mean, I can think of a few examples where you ask countries to give back their hard-fought territory, like, say Iraq in the Gulf War, or North Korea,
or Germany and their hard-fought wins in World War II.
Example, like yes, World War I, World War II.
Yeah. So, yeah, this is. I'm not even going to pretend to be optimistic about it, but this is better than he sounded a few days ago. I would be remiss if we didn't continue to put the pressure on regarding Epstein. Trump is trying very hard, and he's definitely being aided and abetted by his own MAGA ecosphere, media sphere, to try to move on from the Epstein stuff. And I think predictively what they're trying to do is go on the offense here on the Epstein situation, and Vance appears to be the primary attack dog here. Let's go to this clip.
Was it the right move for Comer to send subpoenas to the Clintons?
It absolutely was, and it drives home how, while the Democrats have tried to make this Epstein thing about anything but, the fact that Democrat billionaires and Democrat political leaders went to Epstein Island all the time. Who knows what they did, but it's totally reasonable to ask these questions. What you saw in the House's subpoena is they are trying to investigate all of the things related to this particular case. I know a lot of Americans want answers. I certainly want answers. And I think James Comer and the team of the House, they're doing the right thing. And of course, we know that Clinton, or allegedly he went to the island 26 times, 28 times. Totally appropriate for Comer to be asking what was going on at that island.
Let me get.
Okay. I don't know where to start with this, so I'll just start on the jobs vice presidents are given. One of the things that people talked about in the 2024 election is that, Kamala was pretty well, hung out to dry slightly by the fact that what were the jobs she was given as vice president, before she ended up having to run, for the nomination. The most prominent job that they gave her as vice president was the border, which we knew was sort of a no-win situation for her. This is like that times 1,000, because now you are taking the one issue that the base absolutely fundamentally is on the other side of the Trump administration on now. And you are making the guy who presumably would be the heir apparent for the nomination in 2028, you're making him be the chief defender of the Trump's actions with regard to not disclosing the Epstein files. Like, that is not something a friend does. So, you know what? That's such a shame. Couldn't have happened to a nicer guy. Such a shame for J.D. Vance.
We're not going to let this one go. And we're just, I view it as our personal mission to bring it up every week because, and I know some people are like, well, that's not like the substantive news. We got other stuff like, deportations and the expansion of ICE and wars and all that. But they want everybody to move on from this. There is a cover up happening in plain sight. This is a huge political liability for them. And we've got to keep their feet to the fire on this. Well, let's take one more ad break. And when we come back, we'll catch up on where you've been, Jason, what you've been up to, and what we can expect for the rest of this crazy summer. We'll be back.
You've probably seen a million ads for hair growth products and thought, sure, like that actually works. I did too, until I found out that Nutrafol isn't like the rest of them. Nutrafol is physician formulated, clinically tested, and dermatologists recommended. Nutrafol is the #1 dermatologist recommended hair growth supplement brand trusted by over 1.5 million people. You can feel great about what you're putting into your body since Nutrafol hair growth supplements are backed by peer-reviewed studies and NSF content certified the gold standard and third-party certification for supplements. While many supplements rely solely on ingredient studies, Nutrafol clinically tests final formulations to ensure their efficacy using a variety of hair measurement tools like hair counts and pull tests to assess growth, quality, shedding, and texture. Adding Nutrafol into your daily routine is simple. Purchase online, no prescription required. Automated deliveries and free shipping keep you on track. Plus, with a Nutrafol subscription, you can save up to 20%. You'll have access to free one-on-one naturopathic doctor consults to support you on your hair growth journey, and a Headspace meditation membership is included. See thicker, stronger, faster-growing hair with less shedding in just 3 to 6 months with Nutrafol. For a limited time, Nutrafol is offering our listeners $10 off your first month subscription and free shipping when you go to Nutrafol.com and enter the promo code MAJORITY. Find out why Nutrafol is the best-selling hair growth supplement brand at Nutrafol.com, spelled Nutrafol.com, promo code MAJORITY. That's Nutrafol.com, promo code MAJORITY.
Well, Jason, one for us here. What's been happening, man?
So let's see. We were on. Oh, here is Bella. Hi, Bella. Bella's back. Hi, baby. Bella just came into the room. I guess what's happening is Diana's traveling, as is apparent by that. Hey, baby. Daddy's doing a show. And so I'll be right there. Why don't you tell us what's going on with you, Ravi?
New York is just quiet in August. I'm usually away during this period of time, but I've been, I'm going to be spending, starting September, most of the next, year in Italy learning to cook. Right. And so, yeah, I'll be taking this pod internationally for the most part over the course of the next year. For longtime listeners know that I usually take on a new skill every year. So cooking will be this year. And I'm downshifting pretty significantly for a year. Like, I've got this book coming out in September 2026. I've just finished this New Orleans pod that I talked about earlier, and I'm going to be, basically working on podcasting and politics like for one day a week. And then for the rest of it, like kind of taking like a mini retirement for a year. And so I'm trying to like enjoy and mini retirement / write. I'm working on a new novel. I'm working on another nonfiction book, but not be like sitting in front of Zooms or doing meetings and things like that. So I'll be out in Tuscany and then all over Italy for most of that year. And so I'm just trying to enjoy New York. And what's interesting about New York right now is, we've reached this place where in like so many neighborhoods, people just leave. And like the city is really cool in the summertime. And I've been guilty of leaving in the summer, but it's really amazing just how quiet things are in the summer.
Well, that and the rampant violent crime.
Yeah, I think that's part of it. Yeah, like, quiet as in like, during the day, you know, the gangs are sleeping. So
yeah, right. But you have Batman at night, and
Yeah,
you know,
there
DC
you go.
doesn't have Batman, which is
Yeah.
the issue here. So,
Yeah.
well, no, I'm excited about your sabbatical, and we're gonna have to figure out how we can come and visit and eat some of the food that you learned to make. I think that'd be awesome. I just went. We were just on vacation in actually New York, mostly upstate New York, and it was fantastic. We were with family. The last night there, inexplicably, my back just decided to stop backing. But medicine is
lower
amazing,
back?
man.
Like, what's going on?
No, lower is always. I mean, that's so much worse because then your legs don't quite work. And
Yeah.
that's usually when I have a problem. That's what I had. But it was this weird, like I got this crazy knot in the upper part of my back, and but then a 2-hour car ride and then a 3-hour plane ride and then straight to urgent care. They gave me some meds, and that was Friday, and today is Wednesday. I missed 2 baseball games, but I expect to play tomorrow night because, thank you, doctors and science. I'm right back at it. So anyway, Bella is now here and singing, so I think it's time to wrap up.
Well, well, you talked about you guys should come out and visit me. It's an open invite, but also I'll tell you offline what my dates are. But I'm also going to be doing that Rafael Nadal Tennis Academy at some point, and I imagine your wife would be interested. You guys can come out and hang out there in Mallorca. It's really nice. So
that sounds amazing.
So we should talk about that. But absolutely,
we'll do it. All right, I think I have to go. Thanks. All right, everybody. Thanks for listening. Please leave a 5-star review. Thank you to the Mighty. Remember, we all have a platform. Make sure to use yours today.